Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted. From Packers.com, I am Mike Spofford, joined, as always, by my trusted colleague, Weston Hodkiewicz, coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field. Wes, final show of the 2024 off-season here for us. We spent the last couple of days out there at minicamp practice. There were a couple press conferences, a bunch of locker room interviews. So let's review the tail end of the off-season program here. I'll just throw it out to you. What was your biggest takeaway from this 2-day minicamp?
Jordan Love was locked in. And, the defense had their moments. I've mentioned this to you before. I think Edgerrin Cooper, seeing the athleticism, the explosiveness of him, I thought some of the defensive front really got some nice penetration, some pressure, as much as you can in non-padded practices. But at the end of the day, man, we were looking for Jordan Love to take a step. And I felt like seeing his progression from 2021, where it was like, okay, well, we're seeing this young guy start to learn the position more and get more comfortable, to where Matt LaFleur was talking about he's allowing him to call his own 2-minute offense at times. He's allowing him to kind of expand his repertoire and his understanding of where things are. Jordan Love is one of the coolest, calmest customers that I think I've ever covered, regardless of the position he plays. And just seeing him bring together the experience factor now is fascinating. He still has yet to play more than 1,300 offensive snaps in the National Football League. He's still 25 years old. And I quoted Ric Flair in Insider Inbox. He got to edit that on Thursday, but it's only just begun. I guess also the Carpenters, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true too. I mean, I'm totally with you on Jordan Love. I thought there were periods in each of those practices, Tuesday and Wednesday, where he looked ultra sharp, where he really had that first unit offense clicking, for as much as you can say that when it's not in pads and the blocking up front is not the same, of course. Yep. when guys aren't fully dressed. But along those same lines, I got this vibe over the couple of days that, and I probably said this earlier on one of our shows earlier during OTAs, but I just get the sense that this Packers team is ready to go. If training camp were on Monday, these guys would be like, all right, let's roll here. Let's get to it. That's the sense I get from the locker room in general, both from the veteran guys and the younger guys. Everybody wants to take their break. Don't get me wrong.
Rashawn Gary might not.
What's that?
Rashawn Gary might not. I don't know if you listen to him.
I'm not sure if Rashawn Gary ever takes a break, but there is a time here to relax a little bit, to recharge, to reset. But at the same time, I think these guys, when they do come back for training camp, they will 100% be ready to go and get into that full 100% preparation mode for the regular season.
I think listening to Romeo Doubs, too, whom I'll discuss in a minute, because he's another one of the guys that really stood out to me again this offseason. Stopped me if you heard that before the last 2 summers or 2 springs. But
right.
Romeo Doubs was talking about how special this locker room is and the camaraderie of this team is. And I think a really good indicator of that is, I wrote a couple weeks ago, or actually it was earlier this week, sorry, everything's getting meshed together, about Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks living together for 2 months leading up to coming back for the offseason program. Dobbs said he's already gotten together with Jordan Love before they came back for the offseason program. Obviously, they share a coach, an offseason coach, that they get some work in together. It sounds like the receivers are going to get together with Jordan again during this break. And then Rashawn Gary, who also said he wishes there was another week of the offseason program, which was kind of a funny moment. He said him, Preston Smith, and Kenny Clark are actually going to pull together the defensive line either down in Dallas or California. They haven't sorted that out yet, to get together for some workouts as well. This is a group that generally enjoys being around one another. And that is not always a given in the National Football League. This is a business. People have families, they have interests, they have things they want to do in those 4 or 5 weeks that they can get away from here before quarterbacks and young players have to report back on July 17th. But you can tell that the leadership in there and the way that they handle their day-to-day business, this is a group that generally enjoys being around one another. And it's not even just the position groups. I was in the scrum with Preston Smith, and Carrington Valentine is coming over talking to him afterwards. They're having the fun back and forth over some stuff. That is what I think often will separate the good teams from the potentially great ones, is when it isn't that you're just going out there and doing a job, it's that you're playing for one another. And Quay Walker mentioned it too. He's been on national championship teams. He's played on some really good football teams in the past. The camaraderie for June 12th is already there.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that when the season gets long and when you face adversity is what you often have to lean back on, is that camaraderie.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting back to the impressions that some players made on us, you mentioned Edgerrin Cooper a minute ago, and I have to say, you could see when when that defensive call from Jeff Hafley or whoever was calling it during the 11-on-11 and OTAs, when there was a call that turned Edgerrin Cooper loose, you could see how an off-ball linebacker had 8 sacks last season in college, which is a ridiculous number for a guy who doesn't even line up on the line of scrimmage, right? Brian Gutekunst had made a comment, and one of the others that we heard from during the draft made a similar comment. It might have been John Eric Sullivan, but it was something to the effect of that Edgerrin Cooper's speed is just different. It just looks different out there. And I thought, particularly during this minicamp when Cooper seemed to be just settling in a little bit more in terms of knowing what he's doing on defense. And as I said, some calls that were turning him loose a little bit and just letting him attack the backfield and either go after the quarterback or go after that TFL on a running play. I thought, his speed absolutely jumps off the field. There's no denying it. And it's not a surprise when you see that for the first time in person, at least for me. It's not a surprise then that this guy was drafted where he was and was, one of the first off-ball linebackers to be taken in this draft.
His 40 time is better than half the cornerbacks that were drafted this year. When he's running in 4.51, which was 100th of a second faster than Quay Walker's a year earlier or 2 years earlier, this guy is a real physical specimen. Now, I cautioned, I think both in inbox and on Twitter, saying there's a lot that goes into playing inside linebacker beyond just athleticism.
Yep.
But one of the things we saw from Jeff Hafley in these minicamp practices, they dialed up a lot of blitzes, and it wasn't just the third down variety. They brought a lot of different.
They weren't holding back.
Eric Wilson was doing it. They were running, Corey Ballantine. They were running a lot of these things to throw some extra pressure at the opposing quarterback, but when it was Edgerrin Cooper, it was almost like that suffocating speed where it's like Mike McCarthy used to use that 2.5 second shot clock to throw the football.
It's more like it needs to be 2.2, there's that little extra edge to it that the quarterback is speeding up that clock in his head when it's number 56 who gets turned loose.
And that's why it's going to be fun to watch him when you get the linebacker first running backs pass protection drills, when you see some of the team stuff when the pads come on during training camp. The guy is very exciting to watch. And the Packers are taking this thing slow. He's not in there every time with the ones. They're using Isaiah McDuffie. Eric Wilson's getting a lot of reps there as well. But when you look at Cooper, and if Quay Walker shows that he's able to handle that mic role really well this year, Cooper's going to find his way on the field. It's just going to be too much. He is too much of an athlete not to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of him. There's very little doubt about that. You mentioned Romeo Doubs earlier. I'll let you take it from there. The steadiness with which he performs, and I thought his rookie year he was starting to establish that, but then he had some moments in games that were some letdown moments where you're just like, he failed to maybe make the play that everybody was hoping he was going to make in a certain situation. But man, oh man, we just see, Romeo Doubs, he doesn't look any different. I'm sure, his body is a little bit different than it was as a rookie, but he doesn't really look any different. He's running his routes the same. He's got the strong hands and everything, but there's something he's added something to where he just has a presence on the practice field now, even though he's not Christian Watson and, beating everybody deep and whatever. He doesn't have that breakaway speed or whatever at wide receiver. But you can feel Romeo Doubs' presence on the practice field when he and Jordan Love sort of, have their little telepathy going. And I thought that started to show through here particularly towards the end of the offseason program.
Doubs said it on Wednesday. Jordan Love was his quarterback first in Green Bay when he was running with the twos or whatever you want to call them back in 2022 before he started to establish himself as a starter. He was with Love every day in practice. That telepathy, that's been building up now for over 2 calendar years. And what I enjoy most about watching Romeo, because it was what hit me the most, I was very impressed with his practice on Wednesday. Thought he catches the ball effortlessly. Everything is so seamless. The greatest, like Jordy Nelson, make it look so easy. It makes it look like anybody can go out there and do this.
It makes every play. He makes every play look routine. When what is going on out there in terms of the read and the break and sometimes the catch, not always the most routine, but he makes it look that way.
Absolutely. So when you bring it back and Matt LaFleur goes up to the podium and he was asked yesterday or on Wednesday about him, and he says, I thought he had an outstanding spring. And I immediately thought to myself, and I'm like, he had an outstanding spring in 2023 too.
Yeah.
He had an outstanding spring in 2022 to get himself on the radar as a guy that, hey, with Alan Lazard and Sammy Watkins and Randall Cobb, this guy could potentially contribute right out of the gate too. And I just don't, and as LaFleur also added, he didn't even know if he had a bad practice this spring. And that's just the way Romeo is. If he drops a ball, you're surprised. If he's not in the right spot, it's almost unheard of.
Yeah.
The guy is so about his business, and it's the way he carries himself off the field. It's the way he handles himself on the field. He has a neat personality. He was joking around. You and I were laughing at some of the stuff he was doing on the punt return drill, kind of joshing around with some of the other guys on the punt coverage unit. But at the end of the day, when it comes to playing professional football, I don't want to get into this wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, but Jordan Love knows if he needs to turn to number 87, that guy's going to come through for him.
Yeah, and the way Doubs goes about his business, the extra work he puts in, the intense focus with which he goes about every drill, whether it's an individual drill, whether it's an 11-on-11 snap, he's not looking for attention or accolades for the work ethic and how he goes about it. To Romeo Doubs, like, I'm a professional wide receiver. This is how you're supposed to do the job, right? And he takes it seriously, absolutely every minute that he's in this building. One other thing,
he's built like a wide receiver too.
Yeah,
that was the other thing when you're talking about his physique. When I was watching him, not to interrupt you, but that was one point I wanted to make. He's how you design a wide receiver. And I think that's why I think you could put him in any era of Packers football, whether it was the 2010s, the 2020s, when the Mike McCarthy era started. This guy would have success. He is that type of football player.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. One other thing I'll throw at you with regard to, call it a, mini epiphany or whatever that I had.
A mini epiphany.
There you go. Jair Alexander was one of the veterans. There were a few veterans, Alexander, Xavier McKinney, Keyshawn Nixon, who were excused from the minicamp. They weren't there. So there was some shuffling going on in the defensive backfield in terms of the combinations and who was with the ones and the twos and the rotations, et cetera, et cetera. But it dawned on me watching Eric Stokes and Carrington Valentine essentially be the starting outside corners with the number one defense. This is setting up to be a heck of a training camp competition for who's going to be cornerback number 2 between these two guys. And they're two of the most, I guess you'd say, jovial type guys in the locker room. They're laughing and joking around and all this kind of stuff. But, man, those two are going to go at it on the field in training camp to see who is going to be the outside boundary corner starter opposite of Jair Alexander, and it's going to be entertaining to watch.
Valentine is everything that's great about the National Football League because, again, it shows you there can be 231 picks, and then 232 ends up being a guy that looks like he could be a bona fide starter in this league. And just went out a little early, was probably a little small, didn't have as many plays as he probably needed to make at Kentucky, just didn't have the resume built up for a team to go out and want to make that pick earlier. But boy, oh boy, when you look at the size he put on, when you look at the charisma that he has and the way he plays the position, there is a knack, there is a X factor that I think is associated with being able to play cornerback. I wrote about this in Insider Inbox. I don't know if you saw the video or not, but when Randall Cobb was talking about, he was asked on Bussin' with the Boys about what is the hardest position to play.
Yeah.
And he stopped in his tracks and he said, it is cornerback. And he listed off 8 different reasons why immediately about why that spot is difficult to play. And it then dawned on me, I had my mini epiphany where you can have every tool in the toolbox, Mike, but if you don't have the mentals down, if you're not willing to play on that island and understand what comes along with that, it ain't going to go very good for you.
Right.
Carrington Valentine has that.
Yeah.
Now, seeing him compete now with Eric Stokes is going to be fun to watch, and as we've seen time and time again, you need as many of those guys as possible to survive a season. But Stokes kind of flirted around with playing in the slot. He's not a slot corner, at least not in the traditional sense. He's a perimeter guy.
I agree.
So you may need both. Maybe you only have one at the beginning. Who knows, depending on how the starting lineup sorts out. But to your point, and as you wrote, I think, in the 5 things column, this is one of the things that I think is going to really be what Jeff Hafley, with his background, is looking to accomplish during this training camp, is seeing exactly who's going to be the best fit for that outside spot.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you talk about that, you talk about that mentality that a cornerback needs. I think I mentioned this in Insider Inbox a couple of days ago. I mean, you have to take the field knowing that you're going to be attacked, that the rules in many ways are geared against you.
Yep.
The rules are tilted toward the offensive player to make plays against you. Plays are going to be made against you even when you do everything exactly right. And you have to be able to just forget the whatever bad stuff happens. You have to be able to forget it instantly and line up again, because none of those other parameters that I just mentioned are going to change. Right. They are going to be there every single play, and it really is. It's a position that requires a mentality like no other in a lot of respects, because of the way the game is played, the way the game is officiated, and just the combination of the smarts and athleticism it takes to play it effectively.
It's like defensemen in hockey. I mean, you have to be so apt at running backwards and keeping your balance and flipping your hips and being able to have such insane control of your body. Oh, and then, by the way, also don't get hurt. I mean, like, right. There's so much that goes along with being able to succeed in that position. But to be honest with you, I think that's one of the reasons why this is going to be really exciting to watch, because the Packers have options at all these positions. The secondary we saw without Xavier McKinney here. Evan Williams got some run back there. Zane Anderson had 3 interceptions in Tuesday's practice.
Welcome to the competition, right?
Welcome to the competition. I mean, he was very humble about it after. He said,
sure.
Yeah, it was fun. 3 plays, 2 of them probably were right in my lap. But that being said, that's what Zane Anderson needs to do to interject his name into this thing.
Yes.
With 3 incoming draft picks, with the amount of resources they put into that position with Xavier McKinney coming in. Anthony Johnson Jr. is back and has gotten a lot of snaps in the starting secondary this offseason. So that competition, again, it's up to Matt LaFleur, Jeff Hafley, these coaches to decide how far this thing drags on. But Michael, I don't know, in the first week of a training camp practice, leading up to when they finally get those pads on, if I can remember a time in which there have been this many jobs up for grabs, but all the options are pretty darn good.
Yeah.
You're not looking for somebody to surprise you. You're wondering who's going to be the one that is sort of the cream that rises to the top of that position.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to get back to the opening of training camp coming up here in a minute, but I don't want to forget about our sponsor business. Sirius XM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. And at Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, 50-plus years of better. All right. The last thing I wanted to throw at you before we sign off for a while goes to the upcoming start of training camp. And what do you feel will be the biggest story? What will we be talking about when we return to these chairs and to this show and to these cameras, what will we be talking about most when training camp opens, do you think?
It's an excellent question. I think to me is where the rotations are and who's all involved in those right off the bat. Because I've often said, and you and I remember when we were previewing the offseason program or OTAs, don't pay attention to lineups, don't pay attention to the depth charts. None of that stuff exists right now. And Matt LaFleur even said it on Wednesday. They just want to get guys opportunities. Jordan Morgan played 4 different positions this training camp, or this offseason program. They want to get these guys in position to compete for jobs at training camp. But the thing that's always interesting is when you see the game of musical chairs start to slow down and guys settle into certain spots.
Yep.
I look at this receiving core. I look at this cornerback unit. I look at inside linebacker. I look at defensive line, Mike. The multitude of guys that Green Bay can go, interior, exterior. There's so many. I was talking to Paul Brettel about this at the end of practice on Wednesday. You know, you have Lucas Van Ness and Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith and Kingsley Enagbari, but like I thought Brenton Cox had a really nice offseason. Extremely strong hands and just violent at the point of attack. Deslin Alexander I thought had some good plays. It's really interesting to see who can capitalize on these chances. So my biggest storyline coming out of this is where are all the pieces aligned when we get back? And 1 week into that thing, who's starting to make that climb into their positions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that is definitely what we're going to be watching. I think and hope one of the big stories as training camp opens is that Jordan Love's going to have a new contract. I think that is going to happen, and even if it doesn't happen, maybe by the first day of training camp,
it'll definitely happen on the day you're on PTO.
Yeah, as soon as I take a day off, it'll happen, right? But aside from that, which I think will certainly be a big story, but the one name when you're talking about some of the shifting in musical chairs and stuff that have been going on, the one name that I'm going to be watching the most closely as to where he is Jordan Morgan, the first-round draft pick on the offensive line. Where is he going to be lining up? Now, if Zach Tom isn't fully back from his pectoral injury at the start of training camp, then we may still be in this OTA mode in terms of where guys are, because we know that when Zach Tom is healthy, he's one of the best 5. He's going to be the guy there. But as you said, Morgan's been lining up pretty much everywhere but center during this offseason program. I don't think with a first-round pick and a guy that they see as someone who could legitimately compete for a starting job as a rookie, I don't know if they're going to continue to, keep moving him around. They might decide to put him somewhere and go, okay, go and take that job if you want it. Prove to us that you're the best option there. That's the one I think above others that I'm going to have my eye on. Of course, I'm expecting Edgerrin Cooper to be out there with the ones on defense. I'm expecting Javon Bullard probably to be lining up next to Xavier McKinney. Those kinds of things with those draft picks. Morgan is the guy that sort of has this question mark right now as to exactly where is he going to fit. And maybe it's not the first couple days of training camp, but maybe it's once the pads go on, they're going to make a decision. Yeah. Okay, Jordan, here's your spot, go for it. But I think that's going to be a story to follow at the beginning and throughout training camp with the first-round draft pick.
It's an excellent point, and seeing how he responds to that, because I go back, and he wasn't a first-round pick, but I do think about Zach Tom 2 years ago, where he was still rotating around, but what impressed me the most with him was they would go to their one-on-one periods, and they would line him up as a guard, they'd line him up as a tackle, and it didn't matter if he was facing a Kenny Clark or he was going up against, a Lucas Van Ness or a Rashawn Gary. He held his point of attack.
Yeah.
And that is what ultimately I think when you look for guys trying to carve out roles in a starting lineup, it is how you handle that coursework. All of that stuff you get thrown at. That's how you find your spot in this league. It is an interesting spot. It's the way these offensive lines are built now. You don't just have a guy coming in playing, okay, the 2 tackle positions or the 2 guard positions, or this guy's a center and then we're going to have him work other spots. Jordan Morgan has had the full entree in terms of trying to digest what an NFL playbook is like.
Yeah.
But this was the time to get those reps. And unfortunately, you didn't have Zach Tom. They gave him an opportunity, and hopefully he can learn from it. It wasn't perfect. There were some false starts. There were some plays that I'm sure he wanted to have back. But at the end of the day, he has that pedigree. And I still look at his build, and I'm just reminded so much of the Elton Jenkins, to some extent, Zach Tom, although it's still just, I just can't get over just what Zach's been doing at right tackle.
Yeah.
But he has that malleable frame that wherever you put him structurally, it makes sense.
And here's the beauty of it with how the Packers, how Brian Gutekunst and his staff in the personnel department have constructed this roster, and with where the Packers are with their depth. If Jordan Morgan doesn't rise up and seize a starting spot as a rookie first-round draft pick, nobody's going to panic.
No.
You know, they're not begging Jordan Morgan to say like, hey, we need you to prove that that's they're going to give him the opportunity. But if for whatever reason it's not there yet, it doesn't quite come together in the first year for this young man, that's okay. The Packers have what they need. But I think he's going to be a very curious case to follow through training camp just to see where this goes.
Every single guy, if you think about it, Mike, that has been on the Packers offensive line as like an entrenched starter, got there basically via injury. Even to some extent, Josh Sitton, right? But because you think about Bakhtiari, he's not starting at left tackle if Bulaga doesn't blow out his ACL. Elton Jenkins probably isn't a full-time starter if Lane Taylor doesn't go down with a biceps injury. Bulaga goes in for an injured Mark Tauscher.
Right.
TJ Lang. The list goes on and on and on. That's why it really just comes down to being ready for if that moment does strike.
Corey Linsley for J.C. Treader.
That's the biggest one.
As a rookie in
that was not expected.
As a rookie in 2014. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's a pretty lengthy list in terms of the history of that position group in Green Bay.
And J.C. got through the entire training camp before getting hurt at the very end, which led to Corey Linsley's first in-game snaps happening with Aaron Rodgers when the team went to Seattle in Week 1.
Yeah.
It's that type of stuff that can happen in this sport. But be that as it may, I felt like the Packers rookie class, by and large, what we were able to see, it's an impressive-looking group. We'll get closer to real football now, day by day, week by week. And then next thing you know, you and I will be in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
Yeah, I'm still trying to wrap my head around that one because I think that's going to be here before we know it. But,
I just want an Acai Bowl. That's all I want.
Okay.
That's all I'm asking for.
All right.
I heard the Acai is amazing down there.
Well, July 22nd is the day. It is a Monday. It will be the first practice of training camp. The day after that will be our first show back on July 23rd. We will return from our little hiatus, and we'll be back with Packers Unscripted twice a week and all that kind of stuff. So I know you and I are going to be kind of in and out of the office like over
Hopefully.
the next several weeks and whatnot. So whatever break you do get, my friend, enjoy it, and let's come back ready to roll on July 22.
I think my Conor McGregor fight's falling apart. I mean, I'm still going to go to Vegas regardless, but I think
I was saying, what do you? I'm like, you booked your tickets to Vegas.
Oh yeah, that's done.
Yeah,
that's paid off. But it looks like McGregor and Michael Chandler might not happen.
Oh man.
Yeah, that would suck. Yeah. So here we're going in on a high note here into the break.
And here I'm just like, trying to make my plans to go see some Brewers games and do a little tailgating and sitting in the upper deck at AmFam Field with my scorecard watching baseball.
That's the best type thing to do. But just imagine like if you were in my shoes in that situation where you go down to Miller Park or AmFam Field now, and then it's the Nashville Sounds are playing instead. It's like it's just not the same, man.
Very true. Yeah, if I want to see minor league baseball, which is a lot of fun as well, I just go down to Appleton to watch the Timber Rattlers. I've done that as well, and probably will do that again.
You don't go to Vegas.
No, definitely not. Well, I'll have my fingers crossed for you, my friend.
Thank you.
And with that, we will call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of the team. As I said, we will be taking a little bit of a break here, but we will be back right here in these chairs with these cameras on when training camp begins. So for Wes, I am Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody, and we will see you next time.